In the distant year of 1986, 15 young lives, eagerly anticipating an exciting field trip, boarded a school bus, and from that moment on, their trace vanished forever. There were no signs of a road accident, no scattered debris, not the slightest clue indicating their fate. However, almost 4 decades later, when the long-forgotten vehicle was discovered deep in the forest, near the serene Morning Glory Lake, the world was shaken by incredible news. A survivor was found among the remains. And the memories she held deep within her mind were destined to reveal a truth far more chilling and terrifying than the darkest assumptions. A dense, impenetrable fog descended upon Halstead County, enveloping the area like a heavy, invisible lid that no one dared to lift. It clung tenaciously to the majestic pines, swirled in ghostly eddies under the dim light of porch lanterns, and mercilessly swallowed the familiar hum of tires gliding over asphalt. In such a shroud, one could travel a whole mile and completely miss the fleeting glimpse of their own childhood, erased from memory. This is how, quietly and silently, without any resistance, memories dissolved and vanished here, as if they had never existed. Just as the clock hands passed 7 in the morning, the usual morning silence was broken by a sharp ring. Deputy Sheriff Olivia Bennett had just poured herself her first, aromatic cup of coffee when the characteristic crackle of the radio announced an urgent message. The voice on the air reported a possible discovery near the pines surrounding Morning Glory Lake. A construction crew, engaged in excavation work for a septic tank installation, had accidentally unearthed an object that, in their preliminary assessment, appeared to be a school bus. Most strikingly, the identification numbers of the found vehicle perfectly matched the data of a long-closed but never-solved case. Olivia froze in her kitchen, feeling the warmth of the mug in her hand. Her free hand instinctively reached for the notepad that always lay next to the toaster, but this time she didn't need to write anything down. She knew all the details of the case by heart. Every bit of information was etched into her memory. 15 children and 1 bus driver, that's who disappeared without a trace in that fateful year of 1986. All of them were students at Halstead Ridge Elementary School, the very school Olivia attended, her class, her direct classmates. On that fateful day, she was home, forced to miss school due to chickenpox. And for almost 40 years, she carried this subtle but persistent feeling of guilt, which sat under her skin like an invisible but constantly reminding splinter, a reminder that she survived when others disappeared. Without a second thought, she poured the untouched coffee down the sink, grabbed her car keys, and hastily left the house, not even bothering to lock the door behind her. The path to Morning Glory Lake was silent and felt incredibly long, as if the fog itself, enveloping the area, muffled all sounds and stretched the passage of time. Majestic pines, like silent and patient guardians, stood on either side of the narrow 2-lane road, forming a living corridor. Olivia passed the old, now abandoned ranger station and turned onto a long-overgrown service road that once led to a summer nature camp, the very place the children were headed on that ill-fated day. She distinctly remembered how eagerly and enthusiastically they had looked forward to this trip. It was the last excursion before the long-awaited summer vacation. The lake, the chance to build a bonfire, and new cabins built by volunteers awaited them. Images from the yearbook flashed in her mind. Smiling faces pressed against the bus windows, children with Walkman players in their hands, bright cartoon backpacks on their backs, and disposable cameras ready to capture every moment. She remembered each of them, their faces, their hopes. Upon arrival at the scene, Olivia found that the construction crew had already thoroughly cleared the perimeter around the discovery. From beneath a thick layer of dirt and earth emerged the dull, faded patches of a once bright yellow bus. Its body was cracked and half-deformed under the unrelenting weight of decades. Nearby, as a frozen in silent repentance, stood an excavator, resembling a guilty beast that had just unearthed a long-forgotten grave. "Ma'am," the foreman said, removing his hard hat in a gesture of respect, "we didn't touch anything once we realized what we'd found. You'll definitely want to see this." Olivia merely nodded, her throat so tight with emotion that she couldn't utter a word. The workers had already cleared enough of one side of the vehicle to allow the emergency door to be opened, leading inside. Inside the bus, a sour, earthy smell lingered, mixed with the scents of dust, mold, and the fragile decay that time had left on everything. The seats, covered in age-old dust, still remained in place, and some seatbelts were even fastened, as if their owners had just left their spots. On the floor, under the third row of seats, lay a pink lunchbox, and on the back step, a child's shoe, covered in dry moss, was visible. However, despite these traces of presence, There were no bodies. The bus was completely empty. This circumstance, strangely enough, made the entire situation even more oppressive and unbearable. It stood there, like an empty monument, a question mark buried in the dirt, silently testifying to a tragedy. Olivia stepped inside, her boots creaking on the warped, decayed floor. The air inside was stale and heavy, as if trapped for decades. Reaching the front of the cabin, she noticed a faintly faded class list taped to the dashboard, written in the looping, cheerful handwriting of Miss Henderson, the class teacher who had disappeared with her students. The list contained 15 names, all children aged 9 to 11. At the very bottom, over the list, someone had scrawled a message in different handwriting, darker, sloppier, written in red marker. "We never made it to Morning Glory Lake." Olivia exited the bus, and the air around her felt even colder than before. Somewhere behind her, a bird's cry echoed, but it sounded more like an ominous warning than a greeting. She turned to the foreman, her voice even and devoid of emotion. "Cordon off the area. No one touches anything until the state team arrives." "Yes, ma'am," the foreman replied. She looked at the bus again, surrounded by pines and enveloped in ringing silence. The children were only supposed to be gone for 2 days. Instead, they never returned. And now, almost 4 decades later, the bus had returned without them. But someone had been here long enough to write that note, long enough to leave a message. The old Halstead County Archive building greeted her with the smell of mold and pungent lemon cleaner. Ceiling fans rotated lazily, as if waiting for the rest of the county to catch up to their unhurried rhythm. Olivia stood at the counter, her fingers impatiently drumming on the wooden surface, while the clerk retrieved the file from the archive. Only 20 minutes had passed since she left the bus discovery site, but her hands still felt grimy from the ingrained dust. "Here it is," the clerk said, handing her the folder with both hands, as if it might crumble if handled carelessly. "Sixby Field Trip, Halstead Ridge Elementary School, May 19, 1986. Sealed after 5 years, no updates." Olivia nodded and carried the heavy box to one of the side tables. She slowly opened the lid, as if afraid something unexpected might jump out. Inside were photographs of the children, photocopies of class lists, a detailed list of personal belongings that were reportedly packed for the trip, and at the very bottom, a report stamped in red. "Missing, presumed deceased, no evidence of foul play." This stamp had haunted the town for decades, becoming a symbol of an unsolved mystery. No clues, no crime, no children. But Olivia had always suspected there was more to it than met the eye. Everyone thought so. The bus driver was Kevin Thompson, a part-time employee, recently hired, barely vetted. He had no wife or children, and reportedly fled town shortly after the disappearance. He was never found either. And then there was the substitute teacher. Ms. Henderson was sick that week, and in her place was M. Caldwell, a woman no one remembered hiring. The records listed her address, but it was now an overgrown lot on the outskirts of town, with no trace left. No one had seen her either. Olivia leaned back in her chair, thoughtfully looking at the photocopy of the class photo. She still remembered their names, their bright laughter in the school hallways, their little backpacks swinging cheerfully as they ran towards the bright yellow bus in the parking lot. She traced one face in particular, Ava Johnson. Wide green eyes, a missing tooth, and a pink ribbon in her hair. Ava lived 2 houses down from Olivia back then. They shared ice cream on the curb every summer, enjoying carefree days. The photo made Olivia's chest ache until a sharp knock brought her back to the present. Deputy Miller stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. "Sheriff, you need to see this." 15 minutes later, they were at the hospital. The woman in question had been found by fishermen half a mile from the excavation site. She was barefoot, dressed in ragged clothes that clearly weren't local brands, and her appearance raised many questions. The woman found by the fishermen was dehydrated, emaciated, and barely conscious, but to everyone's surprise, she was alive. The nurse stopped Olivia at the examination room before she could enter. "She's stable, no ID, in her 30s. Keeps repeating she's 12. We thought it was trauma until she gave us her name." The nurse handed Olivia a tablet, on which was written in trembling handwriting, "Ava Johnson." Olivia's knees almost buckled from the shock. "She says she was on a school field trip," the nurse added softly, "and that she's been trying to get home ever since." The woman in the room slowly sat up when Olivia entered. Her hair was long, matted, her face gaunt and pale. But her eyes, they were unmistakably recognizable. Green, wide, they looked at the world with an unspeakable depth. Olivia stopped at the foot of the bed. Ava, she said. The woman blinked, her eyes filled with tears. You've gotten old, she whispered, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. Olivia felt her throat tighten with emotion. Do you remember me? Ava nodded. You had chicken pox. You were supposed to come too. Tears stung Olivia's eyes. She slowly walked to the chair next to the bed and sat down, too stunned to speak. They told me no one would remember? Ava whispered. That no one would come. Who told you that? Olivia asked softly. Ava looked past her at the window, as if trying to find an answer there. Then she turned back, her voice barely a whisper. We never made it to Morning Glory Lake. The sun had already set behind the trees when Olivia returned to the sheriff's office. The golden hour light streamed through the blinds, casting long streaks on her desk. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood, looking at the whiteboard she had cleaned that morning. Now, 15 names were affixed to it in 2 neat columns. Above them, written in red marker, was Morning Glory Lake Field Trip, May 19th, 86. Below, a new heading appeared. Ava Johnson, survivor, returned. She circled Ava's name, then added, found May 5th, 2025 near the Morning Glory Lake site. Appears to have aged normally. Believed to be 12 years old. No memory of events after the bus left school. And again, like an echo, the phrase repeated, we never made it to Morning Glory Lake. Olivia slowly exhaled. Something wasn't adding up. If Ava had been alive all this time, where had she been? And what about the others? By 9 p.m., she was back at the hospital. Doctors had run basic tests. No signs of injury, other than sun exposure, dehydration, and deep psychological trauma. Her DNA was being processed, but Olivia didn't need the test. It was her. She was absolutely certain. Ava had been moved to a quieter wing, away from the hustle and bustle. When Olivia entered, she found her curled under the blanket, looking at a small paper cup of water on the tray. Hello again, Olivia said quietly. Ava looked up. Her face still held the gaunt fragility of someone too long cut off from the world, but her voice was clearer than before. You believe me, don't you? I do, Olivia said. Ava smiled sadly. Most people don't. Olivia sat down. Can I ask you something? Ava nodded. Do you remember the bus ride? Ava looked down. Only the beginning. The driver didn't say much. He wasn't our usual guy. And there was someone else, a man, waiting at the fork in the road. Olivia leaned forward, trying not to miss a word. Do you remember what he looked like? Not really. I think he had a beard. I just remember what he said. What was that? Ava's voice dropped to a whisper, filled with anxiety. He said the lake wasn't ready for us yet, that we'd have to wait. Olivia felt a chill run down her arms, a premonition of something sinister. He got on the bus, Ava continued. And then, I don't know. I woke up in a barn, but it wasn't a barn anymore. It was like a house, but the windows were boarded up, and the clock showed the wrong time. What do you mean? Olivia clarified. They always said it was Tuesday, even when it wasn't. They didn't let us talk about what came before. We had to use new names. Olivia tried to keep her expression neutral so as not to frighten Ava. Who are they? Ava swallowed, gathering her thoughts. At first, there were 2 of them, a woman and a man. She called him Frank Sterling. I don't know if that was his real name, Ava continued. She disappeared a few months later. I think she got sick. Olivia cautiously asked, do you know where the barn was? Ava shook her head. They moved us around, sometimes in vans. We weren't allowed to look outside. They said people had forgotten about us. That it was better that way. Olivia sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she had heard. Some of them forgot about school, about home, Ava said. But I didn't. I never forgot. Olivia reached into her coat pocket and placed something on the tray. It was a faded yearbook photo. Ava took it and stared. That's me, she whispered. And that's Ethan and Chloe. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. You kept this. Olivia nodded. I never stopped. Ava clutched the photo to her chest, as if it were her most precious treasure. Later that night, Olivia sat alone in her truck, parked by the old Halstead barn on County Line Road. She remembered something from Ava's description about the clock, about the boarded-up windows. This barn belonged to a man named Frank Sterling. He had died in 2003, but he had a son named Mason Sterling. The son's last known address was unknown. Olivia got out of her truck and stared at the barn's silhouette in the moonlight. The wind rustled through the grass, creating an eerie melody. An unlocked door quietly creaked open, as if inviting her in. She moved towards the building's wall, her flashlight casting long, dancing shadows on the drywood. Something glinted at the base of the barn wall. Metal. She knelt down and found it. A small bracelet, tangled in weeds. She picked it up. Plastic, faded purple, with a child's name engraved in large, uneven handwriting. Lily. Olivia gasped. Lily Chin, one of the 15 missing, a quiet, artistic girl who loved cartoons and wrote her name on everything she could get her hands on. Olivia slowly stood, her heart pounding in her chest. The past was no longer whispering. It was screaming. The bracelet was still in Olivia's hand when she returned to the station just after midnight. She didn't turn on the overhead lights, only the lamp on her desk, casting an amber glow on the surface. The rest of the office remained quiet and still, shrouded in dimness. She placed the bracelet next to the class photo, aligning it with Lily Chin's face. She was 10 years old, wore glasses, loved dinosaurs, and now this bracelet, found near a barn connected to a man with no current address. Olivia picked up the landline and dialed the Texas Missing Persons and Unsolved Cases Department. She left a detailed message requesting a full report on Mason Sterling and his last known associates. She didn't expect a reply until morning, but something was happening now, and she couldn't sleep when the ghosts of the past pressed against the windows of her mind. By dawn, a quiet tension hung over the excavation site at Morning Glory Lake. Most of the ground around the buried bus had been cleared, and a second team from the state's Historical Preservation Department had arrived to document the excavation, not so much for its historical value, but for what it now represented. Olivia stood by the emergency exit, arms crossed, watching as forensic experts cataloged every inch of the ravaged hull. She had barely slept. Her mind was too loud with surging memories and anxiety. "Sheriff," one of the investigators called out, holding up a sealed evidence bag. "You'll want to see this." She approached. The technician, a man in his 40s with square glasses and a quiet voice, carefully held a plastic bag. Inside was a photograph. The color was slightly worn at the edges, but not aged as it should have been. Olivia frowned. Where was this? Tucked behind a metal panel above the back left window. Honestly, it looked like it had been placed there recently. She took the photo and examined it. It showed a group of children, perhaps 8 or 9 of them, standing in front of what looked like a low wooden building, a barn or a cabin. It was hard to tell for sure. The siding was weathered. The windows were boarded up. The children's expressions were strange, blank, not scared, not smiling, just absent. Several faces were unmistakably recognizable. Chloe, Lily Chin, Ethan, and there, in the very center, Ava. Her green eyes were wide open, but completely vacant. However, Olivia's heart sank when she noticed something even more disturbing. Behind the children, barely discernible in the shadows of the doorway, stood a man, tall, bearded, his face mostly hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. She flipped the photo over. On the back was written, "The Chosen, Year 2. No date, no location, just those ominous words. Back at the station, Olivia placed the photograph next to her notepad and her growing collection of names and fragments. Year 2. This meant the children had been held captive for much longer than she dared to imagine. She opened a county map and began cross-referencing all properties belonging to Mason Sterling, abandoned buildings and old religious sites in the area. One of them caught her attention. Riverbend Camp, an old summer children's camp, acquired in 1984 by a private family trust. Land records had been erased. The property had remained off the registry since the early 90s. It was located on the edge of the National Forest, 30 miles from the bus discovery site. Olivia circled it in red ink. That same day, she brought the photograph to Ava. The moment the image touched her hands, Ava gasped. Her fingers trembled. "This was after the first winter," she said softly. "They made us pose once a season to show progress." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "This building? That's where they kept us the longest. Do you know where it is?" Ava slowly shook her head. "We weren't allowed outside without blindfolds, but I remember the sounds. The river, a whistle at sunset, and the air. It always smelled of burning pine." Olivia's mind raced with renewed vigor. Riverbend Camp was named for its proximity to a bend in the river, and a logging train once ran there. Its whistle echoed for miles at dusk. "Do you recognize this man?" Olivia asked, pointing to the shadowed figure in the photograph. Ava hesitated. "That's not Mason Sterling," she whispered. "That's someone worse." "Worse," Olivia repeated. "They called him Father Silas, but he wasn't a priest. He just liked the sound of it." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened to him?" Ava stared at the photograph. I don't know. He just stopped coming one day after the third year. Then they moved us again. A different place, different rules. Some didn't survive. Some. She trailed off, her voice trembling. Some forgot their own names. Olivia gently placed a hand on Ava. You didn't forget, she said. You came back. Ava nodded fragilely. But they're still there. Some of them. I can feel it. The others. She looked Olivia directly in the eyes. They don't want to be found. That night, Olivia drove north towards Riverbend Camp. The road narrowed to gravel, and the trees thickened like walls, forming an impenetrable corridor. Fog lay low over the ground, swirling between roots and old fence posts, creating a mystical atmosphere. Her headlights caught a faded wooden sign, half consumed by vines. Riverbend Youth Camp. Private property. She parked at the edge of the old property line and got out. The silence was absolute. No birds, no rustling wind, only the low hissing sound of distant water. Perhaps the river. Olivia took her flashlight and walked along the overgrown path. Halfway down the path, she saw it. The building from the photograph. Its roof sagged like a tired back. The porch had rotted through, but the walls were the same, the wooden siding blackened at the corners. The windows were boarded up from the inside, creating a sense of abandonment and mystery. She approached slowly. In the mud, there were fresh tracks, small, childlike. Olivia reached for her pistol, her voice low and cautious. Hello, is anyone here? Silence. Then, from somewhere inside, came a faint creak of floorboards and a whisper, a child's voice, barely audible in the darkness. You don't belong here. Olivia tightened her grip on her flashlight as she slowly stepped onto the warped porch. The wood groaned under her weight, as if warning her. Another whisper echoed from within, low, almost playful. She came anyway. The door was ajar. Just a crack. No recent signs of forced entry. No new locks, no chains. Olivia stared at the names burned into the wood. 12. Not merely scratched, like those below, but branded, with scorched edges, speaking of unbearable heat or time that had warped the very fiber of the wood. Beneath them, in black ink, like an epitaph, read, names we must not forget. Her heart clenched. This was not just a place of confinement, it was a place of memory, suffered and immortalized. She turned to Jonah. The boy stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor, but his eyes held a knowledge beyond his years. Who are they? Olivia asked, her voice barely audible. Jonah looked up. Those who didn't obey. The words hung in the air, heavy and grim. Olivia remembered the last photograph, the one labeled Disobedience. Lily Chin. Were they here? Olivia clarified, pointing to the names. Jonah nodded. Some. Others were before us. They left them for us. So we would know. Know what? What happens if you don't follow the rules? The boy's voice was devoid of emotion, as if he were reciting a long memorized story. Olivia knelt beside him, trying to meet his gaze. Jonah, what happened to those who were here? To those who didn't obey? The boy slowly raised his hand and pointed to one of the drawings on the wall, the one depicting a school bus on fire and a row of small gravestones. They left, he whispered. They were taken. A chill pierced Olivia, not from a draft, but from realization. This place was not just a prison. It was an incubator for something terrible, and then a graveyard. Did you see them being taken? She asked, trying to remain calm. Jonah shook his head. No, we were downstairs. They always locked us in when they came for someone. But we heard screams. And then they left. Who are they? The boy pointed again at the drawing, at the faceless person with arms outstretched like wings. Him. And his people. Olivia looked at the drawing. A faceless person, like a shadow, but with such a menacing posture. Do you know where they took them? Jonah shook his head again. Only that they left on the bus. And then we drew their names. So we wouldn't forget. Olivia felt her throat tighten. Children forced to immortalize the memory of their vanished companions. Jonah, how many of you are here now? The boy looked down. I'm alone. Now. His words sounded like a verdict. Olivia realized the boy was the last one. The last witness, the last victim left in this forgotten place. She needed to get him out of here. And she needed to find those responsible for this. Olivia sat across from Owen Davis, listening to his story unfold before her like a long-forgotten but carefully preserved map. His words were calm, but beneath them lay a deep, unspoken pain. After the fourth year, the group fractured, Owen repeated, his gaze drifting over the chessboard as if searching for answers within it. Father Silas disappeared. He was the one who held us together, who gave us purpose. He said we were the chosen ones, that we had to be ready for a new world, that we had to cleanse ourselves of the sins of the old. Olivia remembered the crossed-out name on the basement wall. Father Silas. What happened to him? She asked. Owen shrugged. No one knew for sure. One morning, he just wasn't there. Some said he left to find more chosen ones. Others said he was taken. But after he disappeared, everything changed. Discipline became harsher. We were punished for the slightest missteps. And then they appeared. Who? The new teachers. They were different. Cold. They didn't talk about salvation or a new world. They talked about obedience. About us being tools. And they started taking children. Olivia remembered the photographs. The names burned into the floor. Disobedience. They called it re-education. Owen continued, his voice growing even softer. Those who didn't obey, those who asked questions, those who tried to escape. They were taken. We heard screams. And then they just disappeared. We knew they wouldn't come back. Did you see them being taken? Sometimes. Through cracks in the doors. They were in the bus. The same bus that brought us there. But now it was different. It was dark. Olivia nodded, recalling the burned photograph from the bus. Why did you stay? She asked. Why didn't you try to escape? Owen looked at her, and a shadow of old pain flickered in his eyes. I believed. I was young. I thought if I was good enough, obedient enough, I wouldn't be taken. I thought I could protect the others. I was the one who helped them maintain order. I was the one who believed it was safe there. I was the one who stayed when others tried to escape. He paused as if gathering his thoughts. But then I understood. It wasn't a sanctuary. It was a prison. And they weren't going to save us. They were going to use us. I saw how they changed, how they broke them. And I realized that if I stayed, I would become like them. Or worse. How did you escape? I waited for my moment. I was older. I was smarter. I knew how they thought. I knew their rules. And I used them against them. I pretended to be completely compliant, that I had become one of them. And when they let their guard down, I left. In 1991, I was 16. They let me go. They thought I was broken, that I would never tell. Owen looked at the chessboard. But I remembered. I remembered every face, every name. I remembered what they did. And I knew that one day someone would come. Someone who would look for answers. Why didn't you tell before? To whom? Who would have believed me? I was a child. I was part of a cult. They would have just thought I was crazy. Or worse, they would have brought me back. But now you're ready to speak? Owen nodded. I saw the news. I saw that you found the bus. I saw that you found Jonah. I knew this was my chance. My chance to tell the truth. My chance to help them. He pointed to the chessboard. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. I've been preparing. I've studied them. I've studied how they work. I know who they are. And I know where they are. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. Who are they, Owen? They call themselves the Brotherhood of the New Dawn, Owen said. And they're still here. They're still looking for children. And they're still using the same bus. Olivia knelt, holding the drawing in her lap. It depicted a girl standing on a hill under a full moon, with a red ribbon in her hair and a sign in her hand that read, "We are still here." It wasn't just a plea, it was a statement. A statement of resilience, of an unbroken spirit. Owen knelt beside her. Ava drew that. She was always the strongest of us. Even when they put her in the thinking room, she didn't give up. She believed that one day, someone would come and find us. Olivia traced the drawing with her finger. She wasn't wrong. No, Owen agreed. But it took a long time. Too long. He pointed to the bracelet lying next to the cassette player. That was Lily Chen's bracelet. She never took it off. Even when they made us wear uniforms, she hid it under her sleeve. Olivia remembered the purple plastic bracelet she had found near the barn. The same one that was on the girl's wrist in the disobedience photo. And the cassette player? She asked. That was Ethan's. He loved music. He hid it to listen at night when everyone was asleep. He said music helped him remember who he really was. Olivia picked up the player. It was cracked, but perhaps it could be repaired. They tried to erase our memories, Owen said quietly. To make us forget our names, our families, our lives before this place. But we resisted. We clung to every little thing that reminded us of who we were. Olivia looked at the ruins around them. This place bore witness not only to suffering but also to incredible strength of spirit. You said the younger ones were moved after the fires, Olivia reminded. Where? Owen stood up. I don't know the exact location, but I know who moved them. And I know they are still connected to the Brotherhood of the New Dawn. Who? The man who was Father Silas's right hand. He called himself the shepherd. He was the one who took the children, the one who led the re-education. He was the cruelest of them all. Do you know his real name? Owen shook his head. No one knew. He was always the shepherd. But I know what he looks like. And I know he still believes in what he's doing. How do we find him? He left traces. He always did. He believed he was invulnerable. He believed no one would ever know the truth. Owen walked to one of the charred beams and ran his finger over it. He was obsessed with symbols. He believed they held power. And he always left his symbol on those he took. What symbol? A bird. A stylized bird, as if soaring in the sky. He said it was a symbol of freedom, but for us, it was a symbol of prison. Olivia remembered the drawing of the faceless man with arms outstretched like wings. And you think he's still using that symbol? I'm sure. He doesn't change. He's too arrogant. He believes he's above the law. Owen turned to Olivia. I can help you find him. I can help you find the others. But you have to be careful. He's dangerous. And he has followers. I'm ready, Olivia said, standing up. She held Ava's drawing in her hand. We are still here. These words now sounded not like a cry for help, but like a battle cry. Olivia stood at the threshold of the garden, her flashlight piercing the dense darkness. It wasn't a room, but a void, enveloped in the smell of damp earth, old metal, and something else, almost sweet, that made her pause. Owen remained outside, his face pale. He said that here, children were not merely confined, they were re-educated, forced to sit in silence for hours, whispering prayers that were not prayers, taught to forget the sound of their own names. Olivia examined the walls. They were covered not only with names but also with tally marks. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Each scratched in order, counting something. Time, days, punishments. In the far corner, her beam caught the edge of something buried under dust and plaster debris. She carefully knelt and cleared the object. It was a small voice recorder, the kind journalists or investigators use, battered, with the tape almost disintegrated inside. She flipped it over. On the plastic, scratched with a pin or nail, was, "For those who remember." She placed it in an evidence bag, her hands suddenly trembling. Because this wasn't just a relic left out of curiosity. It was a message. Someone wanted to be heard. Back at the station, Olivia couldn't wait to listen to the recording. She connected the voice recorder to an old tape player in her office, hoping the tape wouldn't fall apart. With a slight hiss and crackle, a voice emerged. A child's voice, quiet and trembling, but clear. Day 147, the voice whispered. They said I had to forget. Forget my name. Forget Mom and Dad. Forget how flowers smell. But I won't forget. I can't. Then followed a long period of silence, broken only by occasional sobs. Day 231, the voice spoke again, now a little more confident. They made me repeat their words. I am no one. I am a tool. But I know it's not true. I am Sam. And I remember. Olivia remembered Sam, the boy who always got into trouble, who couldn't stay quiet. Day 312, the voice grew weaker, but a strange determination entered it. They took Chloe. She tried to escape. I heard her scream. I couldn't help her. But I'll remember. I'll remember everyone. Lily Chin, Ethan, Ava, Jan, everyone. The recording paused for a moment, then resumed, but now it was a different voice. An adult male voice, low and authoritative. You must forget, child. You must accept your new purpose. You must become part of the whole. Only then will you find peace. Sam's voice came again, now barely audible, but with a stubbornness in it. I won't forget. I won't forget. I won't forget. The recording cut off. Olivia sat in silence, her heart pounding. This wasn't just testimony. It was a cry from a soul trapped in a nightmare. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was a detective from the missing persons unit. Sheriff, we have something for you, he said. We've reviewed old fire records in the county. In 1991, there was a large forest fire near where you found the sanctuary. It was caused by arson. And there's one name that keeps coming up in connection with that case. A man who was a witness but was never properly questioned. His name was Silas Blackwood. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. Silas. Father Silas. What do you know about him? Olivia asked. He was a former preacher who lost his congregation after several scandals. He disappeared shortly after the fire. But there's something else. We found an old sermon of his, recorded on tape. He spoke of the brotherhood of the new dawn, and how they must cleanse the world of sin. Olivia looked at the voice recorder in the evidence bag. Sam. He remembered. And he left a message. Find him, Olivia said. Find Silas Blackwood. He's the key to everything. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Ava woke up again. This time, she wasn't scared. She felt a strange calm. She looked at the nurse. He didn't forget, Ava whispered. He remembers. And he wants us to know they're still here. The nurse didn't understand, but Ava paid no mind. She closed her eyes, and in her head, a quiet but clear voice began to whisper names. Names she thought she had forgotten. Names that were now returning to her, like echoes from the past. Olivia froze in the tunnel, holding her breath. The voice behind the door was quiet, hoarse, and full of something that struck her more deeply than fear. Hope. She stepped forward and knocked again. Hello. My name is Olivia. I'm the sheriff. You're safe now. Silence again. Then, they said we couldn't leave until someone remembered us. Olivia signaled to the deputy behind her to help force the door open. The hinges screeched as they pried it open with crowbars. Thick clouds of dust billowed out. The air was stale, stagnant for decades. Inside, Olivia's flashlight beam fell on a figure, hunched, thin, wrapped in layers of clothing and torn blankets. A girl, but not a child. A woman, perhaps in her 30s or 40s, with wide eyes, matted hair, and skin pale and translucent from years of no sunlight. She blinked and covered her face. Too bright, she whispered. Too fast. Olivia carefully knelt. We're here to help you, she said, trying to keep her voice soft and soothing. You're safe. What's your name? The woman slowly lowered her hands, her eyes, accustomed to utter darkness, struggling to focus on Olivia. They held a mixture of fear and incredible relief. They called me Silence, she whispered. But that's not my name. My name. She faltered, as if trying to pull it from the depths of her memory. Olivia remembered the list of names scratched on the basement wall, and those burned into the floor. Names they were not supposed to forget. Lilychin. Olivia asked softly. The woman's eyes widened. She slowly nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, leaving clean paths on her dirty face. Lily. I'm Lily Chun. Olivia felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had found her. Lily Chun, who had left the message on the voice recorder, who believed that one day, someone would remember. We found your recording, Olivia said. We found your voice recorder. You left it for us. Lily smiled faintly, and it was the first genuine smile Olivia had seen on her face. I knew. I knew someone would come. I knew someone would remember. Are you alone here? Olivia asked, looking around the dark room. Lily shook her head. No. We were here. Always were. But they left. Who left? Lily? Those who couldn't wait anymore. Those who couldn't remember anymore. They just disappeared. One by one. Olivia understood that Lily meant those who couldn't endure the confinement, who lost their minds, or simply died. But you stayed, Olivia said. I promised. I promised Ava I would wait. That I would remember. Olivia remembered Ava's drawing. We are still here. And now she had found the proof. We're getting you out of here, Lily, Olivia said. You're safe. You're free. Lily slowly stood, her legs trembling with weakness. She took a step towards the light streaming through the open door, and her eyes squinted again. Too bright, she repeated. But I'm ready. I'm ready to see the world again. As Lily was led out of the tunnel, she breathed in the fresh air, and an expression came over her face that Olivia would never forget, a mixture of pain, hope, and incredible strength. She was living proof that even in the darkest places, hope can survive. Olivia looked at Owen, who stood aside, his eyes full of tears. He remembered too. And now they had found someone else who remembered. We have to find the others, Olivia said, her voice filled with determination. We have to find those who did this. And we have to make sure it never happens again. Lily Chin, the survivor who had waited for decades, was the key to the puzzle. And Olivia knew that now that she had found her, the truth would be revealed. Olivia carefully removed the moss and branches. Beneath them was a steel hatch, weathered with age but still intact. It was heavy, but Olivia, gathering all her strength, lifted it. A narrow, dark shaft led downwards, emanating cold and the smell of stale air. This was the last tunnel, a sanctuary for those the world was never meant to know about. She descended the rusty metal ladder, her flashlight piercing the gloom. Below, a corridor opened up, wider and taller than the one leading to Lily. The walls were smooth, concrete, without scratches or marks. There were no signs of despair here, only cold, sterile silence. Olivia walked forward, her footsteps echoing. The corridor led her to a large, circular room. In the center stood a massive table, surrounded by chairs. Maps, diagrams, and charts hung on the walls. This was not a place for holding children, but a command center. Old papers, covered in dust, lay on the table. Olivia picked one up. It was a list of names, but not children's names. Names of adults, with dates, numbers, and notes. Nearby were photographs. Men and women in severe suits, their faces devoid of emotion. And among them, a familiar face. The faceless man from Jonah's drawings, the shepherd. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. This was the heart of the Brotherhood of the New Dawn. The place where decisions were made, where abductions and re-educations were planned. She continued to examine the room. On one of the maps, a series of dots were marked across the country. Each dot was labeled with a bird symbol. The shepherd's symbol. They're still here, Olivia whispered. They're still active. Suddenly, she heard a sound. Quiet, almost inaudible. Footsteps. Someone was here. Olivia quickly turned off her flashlight and hid behind the table. Her heart pounded. She drew her pistol. The footsteps approached. Then a voice spoke, low and calm. I knew you would come, Sheriff, the voice said. I've been waiting for you. The door opened, and a man entered the room. Tall, with gray hair, dressed in a dark suit. His face was familiar to Olivia from the photographs. It was the shepherd. Silas Blackwood, Olivia said, stepping out from behind the table, her pistol aimed at him. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. You know my name. That's good. It means you're ready for the truth. The truth is that you kidnapped children, broke them, and used them for your own purposes, Olivia replied. We saved them, Silas countered. We saved them from a decaying world. We prepared them for a new dawn. You destroyed their lives, Olivia said. You locked them in darkness. You made them forget who they were. Not all of them forgot, Silas said, his gaze sweeping over the table where the papers lay. Some of them proved more resilient than we expected. But it doesn't matter. Our plan continues. What plan? We are creating a new generation. A generation that will be completely obedient. A generation that will be ready to embrace the new world we are building. You're insane, Olivia said. Silas laughed. Insane? I am a visionary. I see the future, and I am building it. He took a step forward. Do you think you can stop me? Do you think you can stop the dawn? Olivia didn't answer. She knew this wouldn't be a simple arrest. This would be a battle. A battle for the souls of children, for the future, for the truth. Suddenly, Silas made a sharp movement. Olivia reacted instantly, but he was faster. He pulled something from his waistband. Not a gun. A knife. You don't know who you're dealing with, Sheriff, Silas hissed, lunging at her. You don't know what I'm capable of. Olivia dodged the first strike, but the knife glinted in the air, and she felt a burning pain in her arm. The pistol fell from her weakening grip. Silas smiled. Now you're mine. But Olivia didn't give up. She was the sheriff. She was here to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And she wouldn't let him win. The mural haunted Olivia. The girl's face, scarlet, drawn with swirls of blue and gold, her arms outstretched as if she were trying to fly. She was older than the others in the photographs, perhaps 14 or 15. Her presence in the sealed room indicated something special about her. Scarlett remembered. She left a light for us. These words echoed in Olivia's mind. What kind of light was it? Hope. A clue? Olivia returned to room 6. She carefully studied the mural, trying to find a hidden meaning. Scarlett's hands were outstretched, as if she were offering something or pointing. Her gaze was directed upwards, towards an invisible light source. Olivia raised her flashlight, tracing the direction of her gaze. The ceiling was ordinary, concrete, but in one spot, directly above Scarlett's drawn head, there was a barely visible crack, almost blending with the concrete's texture. Olivia called one of her deputies over. Look here. I think something's wrong with this section of the ceiling. The deputy, an experienced forensic technician, carefully examined the spot. Sheriff, there's a slight deformation here. It looks like something was built in and then sealed up. Olivia's heart beat faster. Open it. Carefully. The work took time. The concrete was strong, but eventually, they broke through. Behind it was a small niche, carefully hidden. Inside lay a metal box, tightly sealed. It was old, covered in patina, but not rusty. Olivia carefully opened it. Inside, wrapped in thick but yellowed cloth, lay several items. A few children's drawings, folded into quarters, a small wooden airplane, and a thin, inscribed notebook. Olivia picked up the notebook. The cover was made of thick paper, and on the first page, in a child's handwriting, was written, Scarlett's Diary. She began to read. The handwriting was neat, but with each passing day, it became more nervous. Scarlett described her life in the sanctuary, her observations of the shepherd and his teachers. She wrote about the children who disappeared and how she tried to remember their faces, their names. But then the entries changed. Scarlett began to describe her own attempts to understand what was happening. She wrote about Room 6, about how it was used for re-education of those who resisted, and about what she saw there. They weren't just breaking us, one entry read. They were looking for something inside us. They called it the spark, and they tried to ignite it, or extinguish it. Olivia frowned. The spark? What could that mean? The last pages of the diary were written hastily, as if Scarlett knew she had little time. She described her plan. A plan not of escape, but of resistance. I can't leave, Scarlett wrote. They won't allow it. But I can leave a trace. I can leave a light. For those who come. For those who will remember. She described how she hid this diary, how she drew the mural to point to it, and how she tried to leave the door open, as Lily had said. The door open for what? Olivia whispered. The last entry was short, just a few words. They found me. But I left them a gift. I left them a path. The diary ended. Olivia closed it, her mind working at its limit. Scarlett didn't just escape. She left behind a whole series of clues, a map. She was not just a victim, but a fighter who, even in captivity, tried to resist her tormentors. Sheriff, a deputy's voice called out. We found something else. In one of Scarlett's drawings. On the back. Very faintly scratched. Olivia took the drawing. It depicted a simple landscape, trees, a hill, a river. But on the back, barely visible, coordinates were scratched. Not just numbers, but something that looked like geographical coordinates. This could be a location, the deputy said. Perhaps the last place they took her. Or what she wanted us to find. Olivia looked at the coordinates, then at Scarlett's diary. The spark. The path. The gift. Scarlett didn't just leave a light, Olivia said. She left us a map to the truth, and, perhaps, to those who were still in their hands. She knew this would be the most dangerous step, but Scarlett, Lily, Ava, Jonah, Owen, they had all been waiting for this moment. The moment when someone would finally follow the path they had left behind. Olivia gathered everything. The diaries, the photographs, the mural, its copy, the recorded confessions, the found items. She filed an official report titled Morning Glory Lake 15. Case reopened. It would take months, perhaps years, for the full truth to come out. The state would investigate what was missed. Families would come forward. But for Olivia, this was more than just a case. It was about restoring justice, giving voices back to those who had been silenced. She sat in her office, looking at the stack of documents. Finally, she felt she had done what she needed to do. The next morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise over Morning Glory Lake, Olivia arrived at the hospital. Lily, Harper, and Jonah sat together in the common room. Ava, still weak but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, lay in bed. Owen stood by the window, looking at the dawn. We found him, Olivia said, her voice calm but resolute. Silas Blackwood. And his accomplices. They've been arrested. Silence filled the room. Then Lily slowly nodded. Finally, Harper took Lily's hand. We did it. We endured. Jonah, who had been silent until now, looked up. They won't take children anymore? Olivia knelt beside him. No, Jonah. No one will take children anymore. We'll make sure of that. Owen turned from the window. What now? Now the healing process begins, Olivia said. You will all be able to get the help you need. You will be able to rebuild your lives. And you will be able to tell your stories. The world needs to hear them. Lily looked at Harper, then at Jonah, at Ava. We're not alone. Never were, Harper replied. We just didn't know it. Olivia knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. The memories were deep, the wounds fresh. But now they had hope. They had each other. And they had the truth. Later that day, as Olivia was about to leave, Jonah approached her. He handed her a small, crumpled piece of paper. This is for you, he whispered. Olivia unfolded it. On it was a simple drawing, a sun shining brightly over a lake, and several stick figures holding hands. Below the drawing, in a child's handwriting, was one word. Thank you. Olivia smiled. It was more than just a thank you. It was a promise of a new dawn that was real. As Olivia left the hospital, the sun was already high above Morning Glory Lake. Its rays pierced through the leaves of the trees, illuminating the road. The world seemed brighter, cleaner. She knew this was just the beginning, but a start had been made. And now, thanks to the courage of the children who refused to forget, the truth had finally come to light. And the world would never forget again. Olivia kept the letter in her desk drawer. She didn't open a new case. Not yet. But sometimes at night, when the wind rustled the trees outside her window, she thought about that name, about those they found, and about those they didn't. She looked at the stars above Morning Glory Lake and wondered how many names the world had forgotten, and how many more were waiting for someone like Lily, Scarlett, or Olivia to remember. Sometimes, driving past Harper's bookstore or walking past Lily's cottage, Olivia felt not just the satisfaction of a duty fulfilled, but a deep, quiet responsibility. She knew the world was full of forgotten stories, and now that she had uncovered one of them, her view of reality had changed forever. Morning Glory Lake remained as serene as ever, but for Olivia, its waters now held not only the reflections of stars but also the echoes of whispers, names burned into wood, and promises made in the darkness. She was the sheriff of this quiet town, but now her duty extended far beyond its borders, into the shadows where other forgotten ones waited. And she knew that when the time came, she would be ready to remember.